Welcome to Blueprint for Health and Healing, reversing disease from its foundation. Hi, I'm Dr. John Clark, and today's topic is osteoporosis. Nothing to crack up about. Lady came to my meetings limping. As a doctor, I always wonder when people show signs of disease. I said, "What happened to you?" The story came out. She had a long history. It went back to when she was 24 years old. She had had pain in her bones, pain that kept her awake at night. She went to her doctor. He did a bone scan and found out that she had osteoporosis. He told her, "You have eggshell thin bones." Kim was not happy when she was offered medication. She's only 24. Why get started on a life of medication so early? But she knew why she had osteoporosis. She'd not been keeping up with a good diet, burgers and fries and sodas, and so she decided that at that moment she was going to go with a plant-based diet. Within 3 weeks, all the pain she had in her bones went away. Wow, relief. What a benefit. Next, she was offered a repeat scan. She says, "No, I've had enough radiation. I know what to do." But here she was, at age 63, limping into my meeting. "What happened, Kim?" She says, "Well, 3 weeks ago, I got thrown off my horse. Landed on the ground rather suddenly with a big impact, and I broke my hip. I was taking the surgery, and when the surgeon came out of surgery, he says, 'Wow, you had the strongest bones I've had to work on in a long time.'" Well, we want to talk to you about osteoporosis, what causes it, and what you can do, like Kim, to reverse it. A lot of people get this in America. 10 million people have it. Another 43 million are at significant risk with what we call osteopenia, meaning too little bone. Osteoporosis means there's holes in your bone. I used to treat osteoporosis with bright lights and cold steel. I'd be the one fixing that hip. But now I do lifestyle medicine. We help people to be healthy so they don't need to have bright lights and cold steel. It's really a lifestyle disease and treated most effectively with straightening out the lifestyle. It just makes sense if you caused it by lifestyle to fix it with lifestyle. We're going to talk about bone fractures that you can avoid. We're going to talk about preventing osteoporosis by understanding its causes. We'll talk in detail about calcium and protein, things that people think about when they think about bone strength. And we'll talk about the benefits of exercise, sunlight, and vitamin D. So here's a couple of pictures under a microscope of the trabecula of bone. This is bone that would be like in your wrist or your hip or your spine, which is often places scanned for osteoporosis. Notice on the left we have normal bone, lots of calcium, lots of white there, very small holes. Those holes help make strength. On the right-hand side is osteoporotic bone. Porosis meaning holes, and you can see that the holes are very big. This bone is getting weak. See, each one of those trabecula are like girders in a bridge. If you had to drive across this bridge, how safe would you feel if half the girders were removed? Well, osteoporosis is removing half of the girders out of your bone. Now, people with osteoporosis have a serious problem, and that is fractures. There's over 2 million osteoporotic fractures per year. They largely occur in the hip, in the spine, otherwise known as the vertebra, and also the wrist. And so we want to make sure you don't get these fractures, because broken bone not only hurts, but it can disable you. Spine fractures happen because the bone gets so thin it won't hold up the body, the shoulders, the head anymore. And notice on this radiograph, a sideways x-ray of somebody, that you can't hardly see the bones in their spine. Very interesting, huh? And this is osteoporosis. And when you get this, you start to bend over. We call it kyphosis. You start to lose height. You're not as tall as you used to be. You have acute and chronic pain. And your abdomen begins to hang out, to bulge out as you're leaning over. That won't win you any points. And then the cramping of your stomach, the cramping of your intestines will leave you with some reflux disease. What's more, your lungs are cramped so you don't breathe well. Oh, that sounds depressing, doesn't it? Well, it is, and people get depressed when this happens to them. Then there's fractures of the hip. You know, you can't walk if you break your leg like that. And it comes about because of all the osteoporosis, and women are much more likely to have osteoporosis. And so 35% of postmenopausal white women have this osteoporosis that could lead to a hip fracture. By 2025, next year, they figure that 50% of Americans over the age of 50 will have osteoporosis of the hip. Why is that? Well, we'll get to that here shortly. It costs a lot of money, too. When you break a hip, I mean, you're going to have surgery, you're going to have time in the nursing home, in the hospital. And in 2002, we spent $18 billion on hip fractures. They figure by 2050, this number will rise to $131 billion, if we're still using dollars. Anyway, that's aside. And up to 1/3 of patients who have a hip fracture die within a year. That's a serious death rate. That's more than many other diseases, diabetes, heart disease, cancer. I mean, within a year, 1/3 are dead. Well, it's really that bones are a barometer of the health of the rest of the body. If you're breaking your bones, you probably have other problems too. Now, when we want to study a patient, we do it with a DEXA scan. And when we take a DEXA scan, we tend to scan the hips and the spine, and we come up with a T-score. And if your T-score is 1, you're fine. If it gets below 1 and you go to -1, then we say you have osteopenia. Penia meaning a small amount of, osteo meaning bone. And if you go below -2.5, you have osteoporosis. The lower your score, the more likely you are to die of that hip fracture. The lower that score, the worse your health probably is. Now, people who break their hip don't tend to bounce back real fast. People who break their hip end up with big problems. 1/4 of hip fracture patients become disabled in the following year. 2/3 do not return to their normal activity levels. Can't walk up and down stairs as well, or can't go out for a run or anything. Have difficulty completing tasks. Can't go back to normal employment. 1/5 require long-term nursing home care. That means they go there to stay. It's the last move of their lives. And this accounts for as much as 180,000 nursing home admissions per year. And that's a lot of people heading to the nursing home. 68% worry that another fracture would put them in the nursing home. 73% are concerned that they will have to reduce activity with family or friends. Oh, why don't you all just go on out without me? I'm kind of slow these days, and I wouldn't want to fall down and break another bone. Isolation, social distancing. And 89% fear breaking another bone. And within 5 years, most do. I guess what I'm telling you here is you don't want osteoporosis, so you need to find out why you get it and how you can avoid it. This isn't the disease you want in your later life. So why? Why do we get osteoporosis? And I'm saying primary osteoporosis here, and not secondary. Secondary would be due to drugs and other diseases. And so why do we get it? I'm going to put up a picture and ask you what you think of it. What's this? Oh yeah, sugar. Well, you mean you're starting off your talk with sugar? Well, yeah, I mean sugar, 16 teaspoons a day will increase the amount of calcium from your bones that you pee out in your urine by 124%. That's more than double. Wow, okay. Eat that donut, pee out that calcium. Yeah, that's about the way it works, and add a little chocolate to it. Oh, I'm going to get very unpopular now. People love their chocolate, right? Well, add a little chocolate to it, and you get 147% more urinary calcium. You don't want to pee out your bones. So these unnatural, highly refined products that do this to you are something that you're going to have to find substitutes for. Eat something different. Well, we'll show you what to eat as we go along here. And paired up with sugar is, what's this? Salt. You mean salt increases osteoporosis? You see, salt is sodium chloride. Sodium is a positive ion. It fights with calcium in the kidney. Calcium loses. The kidney dumps calcium, saves sodium. So the more sodium you eat, the more calcium you dump, and you end up with problems with the retention of fluids from the sodium. This is not a good substitute. So don't overdo it on salt. You need a little salt. How much salt do you need? I mean, your true physiological requirements are only about a quarter teaspoon a day. Most Americans are getting 2 teaspoons a day, 8 times that much. So you can see why we're dealing with osteoporosis. There's things that affect the cells in the bone. There's 2 types of cells in the bones. There's the construction crew cells called osteoblasts, and there's the deconstruction or demolition cells called osteoclasts. And if you're drinking lots of alcohol, especially during your young adult years, you tend to downregulate the builders, the construction crew, the osteoblasts. It'll give you osteoporosis for a long time, for a lifetime. And I mean, what do I do to reverse that? Well, we'll get to that. We'll talk about that. But just be aware of that alcohol and its associated vice, tobacco, are definitely going to cause you osteoporosis. Different mechanism on tobacco. It has hormonal effects that actually interfere with the testosterone metabolism of men, and of course women have that a little bit of testosterone too. Messes with your hormones, and calcium is under hormonal control, and it gives you osteoporosis. Other things in this category would be like tea, coffee, caffeine of any source. And when you drink caffeinated beverages, caffeine is a diuretic. And one of the ways it works as a diuretic is by dumping calcium. As soon as you drink that coffee, you start dumping calcium, magnesium, sodium, all kinds of things. And you end up with problems just because you wanted to stay awake. Well, hopefully this will wake you up and you'll find something else to stay awake. What do I do in the morning if I can't wake up? Jump in a shower, turn it to cold, scrub your skin real well. That'll do a lot for you. That'll wake you up. That'll wake up your nerves. What'll happen if I quit drinking caffeine? You'll have a headache for about 3 days. But drink lots of water, get lots of exercise, take lots of showers like I'm talking about here, and you can do it. Now, what are these guys? You got it, couch potatoes. Well, what are couch potatoes? Well, people who don't get much exercise. Oh, so you need to stimulate your bones when you walk, when you move, when you put stress on your bones by lifting things. It has the effect to create electricity. We call it the piezoelectric effect. And so weight-bearing exercises stimulates electricity in the bones. Electricity in the bones attracts the calcium, helps the osteoblast to lay down calcium. It improves bone integrity, bone density, and bone strength. And so osteoporosis of inactivity will affect anybody, men and women equally. So keep that in mind as you go out there with your backpack to march around. Now, vitamins and minerals. And this lady, what's she doing? Well, getting sunlight. And certainly vitamin D is very important for osteoporosis. If you're deficient in it, you will have osteoporosis. But equally important is vitamin K, B12, B6, folate, minerals such as magnesium, copper, boron. And if you are low in these through a deficient diet, a diet largely of white product like macaroni and cheese, white bread, white rice, then you're in trouble. Do I need to write down these vitamins and calculate how much I get every day? I just say eat a lot of good food that we'll talk about, and you don't need to get that involved in the actual details. Now I want to mention schedule here a little bit. It's interesting that when you have meal times and bedtimes at the same time, it benefits your melatonin. Melatonin, if you're low in, will end up giving you osteoporosis. So you want to get a good schedule that will give you good melatonin. What about this picture? What do milk, eggs, and cheese have in common? Some people say they are all dairy products. Well, not the eggs. Oh, right. Well, so what they are is they are foods that have cholesterol in them. We could put meat in there too. And so cholesterol, especially oxidized cholesterol, tends to stimulate bone resorption. It's the inflammation, it's the free radicals. And you end up with more and more bone that is weak. Another cause of osteoporosis is toxic metals, heavy metals, such as mercury. Look at the teeth. And when you have mercury, it dramatically decreases bone mineral density. Mercury can come from other sources as well. Fish, vaccines, some high fructose corn syrup is contaminated with it. And so this is a big thing because the mercury poisons the construction cells that would give you good, strong bones. What's this lady drinking? Well, looks like a very brown liquid, but it's sort of clear. You know what it is. It's colas, right? It's a Pepsi Cola or something like that. And when she drinks this, what she's actually drinking is a cocktail of acid. The biggest one being an acid that we know as phosphoric acid. I asked a chemist from Coca-Cola why they put it in there. He says, well, it helps the flavor and it sort of preserves. And I'm thinking, man, that's a poor excuse. Anyway, phosphoric acid, it makes the whole system acidic. Well, what happens if I go acidic? Well, then your body works very hard to make you alkaline again. How does the body make me alkaline? Well, how do you get a acid stomach to quit hurting? Well, you take a calcium pill, like Tums. Well, that's what your body does. It steals calcium to fix this acid, to neutralize this acid, and it does it by stealing calcium from the bones. Stolen calcium. Who stole the calcium? Well, it was the soda pop. Oh, okay. And keep this in mind. This is a very serious point because we're going to come up with other acid-forming foods that'll do the same thing. This food has the acid. Other foods will come up here that are also loaded with acid, and some that just make acid when you eat them during the digestion and metabolism. And so the body's choice of a element to neutralize acid is calcium. So any increase in acid, either through drinking it, or eating foods that turn to acid, is going to increase calcium loss, calcium excretion in the urine. It's going to result in osteoporosis. Example, cheese. A diet which makes your blood more acid significantly increases the urinary loss. What are some examples of foods that create acid? Well, to different extents, grains, potatoes, animal products, especially cheese. Let's look at this on a graph here. On our graph, you see that fruits and vegetables do not create acid. It's a negative acid, meaning alkali. So you eat lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, drink lots of water, you don't have anything to worry about. You don't have to fuss with your acid. But if you start eating lots of grains, well, the grains aren't that much, and as long as it's in balance with the fruits and vegetables, it'll be great. But then fish goes a little higher, meat's even more. But look at cheese. I mean, if you want osteoporosis, you've got the food that'll do it for you. Just eat some of that stuff. So we tend to tell people eat more toward the left-hand side of this chart. The more you can eat fresh fruits and vegetables and grains, the less osteoporosis you have to worry about. And so speaking of meats, you know, why is animal protein such a problem? What's the story on protein? Well, here's the story. Meat has a different distribution of amino acids than does a vegetable. You can have protein that's all just one amino acid. You can have protein that's 5 amino acids. It's a little like colors in a picture. Here my pictures are very brown with these 2 cows. So brown and white and maybe a little green are the major colors. That makes a picture. If we looked at another picture like the background, it's more, you know, different blue-greens. And see, if you have different colors that make different pictures, or you have different amino acids that make different proteins. Animal protein is overrepresented with amino acids like methionine, cysteine, things that actually are more acid-forming because they have either sulfur or phosphorus side groups. And so you get a lot more acid out of a piece of beef than you would out of a bowl of broccoli. What about pickles? Well, how'd they make it pickles? Well, they made it pickles with vinegar. And vinegar contains acetic acid. Calcium is taken from the bones to buffer this, to remove it from your body. So you go drinking apple cider vinegar. People do it. Studies show you get demineralization of your bone. I mean, in the laboratory, when we want to study a piece of bone, like we showed you at the beginning of the lecture of the 2 pieces of bone, one with osteoporosis and one without, then we use vinegar. You put the bone in vinegar, the calcium all comes out, and then you can slice it and put it under a slide. Oh, okay. So maybe I shouldn't be drinking bone demineralizing solution. Yeah, that's a good conclusion. And now look at this guy. Does he look happy? Does he look like he had a good day, a good life, like he's energetic? No. Well, what's his problem? Well, he's had chronic stress. Stress raises cortisol. Cortisol has been shown to increase osteoporosis. People taking cortisol pills get osteoporosis, otherwise known as prednisone or steroids. And so people need to avoid stress. I mean, this is something that would have to come up in the stress management lecture. Maybe we got to go to that one pretty soon. Well, let's finish this one first. So, Mr. Stress. Does she look happy? No. Maybe a bit depressed and depression. People with depression, you know, their risk of hip fracture goes up dramatically, and their risk of falling goes up dramatically. So, this reminds me of a famous Bible text. A merry heart doth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. Maybe the wise man knew something about osteoporosis. Well, on the other hand, let's get happy. Maybe in a good marriage. Men in a stable marriage have far less osteoporosis as opposed to widowed, divorced, or separated. Women who report having supportive husbands had better bone density. So, wow, what a solution. Okay, now let's talk about bones because in terms of their metabolic activity, your bones are basically always under construction. A bit like the roads down your highway, huh? And since they're always under construction, they always need materials for constructing, meaning you got to eat good food. And if you get behind, you're in trouble. But that starts when you're young. So for a woman, by age 25, bone has reached maturity, meaning it won't get any longer, bigger, you know, it won't get any taller. By 35, you've reached peak bone mass. You're sort of at the top of your game there. And so from there, it's a bit downhill because as you get into your 40s, you start to lose bone at 0.5% per year. By the time you're in those perimenopausal years, hot flashes and so forth, you will increase bone loss up to 3% per year. And if that continues for 10 years, you could lose 30% of your skeleton, your skeletal bone mass, your bone strength. That's serious business. Yeah. Well, we got to talk more about that. But let's go more deeply into this acid diet thing. Let's go more deeply into taking calcium. A lot of people feel that calcium's the answer. I lost calcium, I better get it back. And so they start eating calcium. How much should they eat? They usually go to the National Academy of Sciences for recommendations. National Academy of Sciences says that you need 1,000 milligrams of calcium per day. Are they right? Are they the only voice out there? No, they're not the only voice out there. National Institute of Health looked at the epidemic of osteoporosis and said, we better up that number to 1,500 milligrams. World Health Organization, who doesn't just take into account the Western countries, but they have a lot of third world countries who don't really suffer so much osteoporosis, said, well, 500 is really enough because, speaking of the entire population of the earth, osteoporosis isn't that common in every country. And so who's right? How would you know? How do you figure this out? And is there downsides to taking this calcium? Well, obtaining calcium from supplements rather than natural whole food sources increases the risk of death by heart attack by 30%. Especially if you're getting it from cow's milk, that poses an even greater risk to the heart because of the animal protein and some of the problems with cow's milk. Wow. Well, okay, back to how much I should be taking. Well, if we look at studies of calcium consumption over 750 milligrams per day actually is counterproductive. Notice that the line of osteoporosis comes down until it hits the 750 milligrams of calcium intake per day, and then it goes back up. And that's not what you want. So really taking 1,500 is not as good as taking only half that much. So, well, what if I didn't want to take it from pills? If I realized that they caused, more problems? One of the reasons they cause more problems is a lot of those pills are contaminated with lead, have heavy metal. But let's look at sources of naturally occurring calcium. 1 cup of turnip greens gives you 240. Hazelnuts, 250, green soybeans, 260, figs, 270, whole milk. Why do I have whole milk in here? I thought you said milk wasn't good. I just want you to compare here, but just here's the caveat. Whole milk has so much phosphorus in it that it takes all the calcium it gives you to buffer the acid made by that phosphorus, plus some. You actually have a negative calcium balance. It means that really, milk's calcium is not bioavailable to you. And then there's amaranth grain and colored greens. Notice that colored greens has 250 or 60. Carob flour, often eaten as a substitute for chocolate in products, and there's a lot there. And then if you really want the top one, go out to your weed patch. There may be some better calcium growing in the intruders than in what you've cultivated. And so lamb's quarters, 464. This stuff grows around our property. Sometimes when we make steamed greens, I go out and collect a bit of that. And so good food, good calcium, without the downsides of supplements, the side effects of supplements. Now let's get back to the protein issue. When you eat animal protein, you're in trouble. So let's look at a study here that compared eating animal protein, what happened to your urinary calcium. Remember we talked about all the calcium that ended up in your urine as you ate sugar and coffee and salt and so forth. And then the calcium balance at the end of the day. Is it positive? Is it negative? If you're on a relatively low protein diet, which would be somewhere around 40-50 grams per day, then your calcium in your urine in this study was 168. a good low number. And when you calculated, if you did a little math and compared your intake versus your losses, you were actually in a positive calcium balance, gaining 31 milligrams of calcium per day. Well, that's good. So what's the matter with protein? Well, most people don't get that low protein. They get at least twice that much protein. You get twice that much protein, you lose almost twice that much calcium in the urine, and you go into a negative calcium balance. I mean, what happens if this was dollars? What would happen if you lost $58 a day? Oh boy. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's, yeah. You don't want to lose every day. And what if I triple the protein? Not an unlikely scenario for the American diet and the fast food joints. And so if you're getting 142 grams of protein per day, you can see you'd be down to negative 120 on your calcium balance. Well, maybe I can just take a few more calcium supplements and those will go down the toilet. Well, let's see what happens when you take more calcium supplements. Similar diets across the bottom, somewhere around 50 grams, somewhere around 100 grams, somewhere around 150 grams across the bottom. And we're going to add to that or try to counteract that with 1,400 milligrams of calcium per day. That's a lot of calcium. It's a lot of big pills. See the big pills? Yeah, a lot of big pills. And so what happens if I take 1,400 milligrams of calcium to try to stop the loss of calcium? Okay, low protein diet. We're still in a positive balance with 20 milligrams increase in calcium per day. If we double that amount of protein, then we all of a sudden get in the negative by 30. I thought taking 1,400 milligrams of calcium a day would help. Remember our chart that showed that anything over 750 milligrams of calcium really went nowhere? I mean, in other words, you cannot take enough calcium to fix the problem. Calcium is not the answer. Triple the protein at the bottom and you're really in a deficit. Taking calcium is not the answer. Reducing protein is better. Well, okay, how much protein do I need? I don't want to go too low. And so let's look at protein and how much you need and really do this upright, because you would hate to go protein malnourished. Think of all those pictures in Africa of those bulging bellies on those kids that are said to be protein deficient. Well, okay. And people have been concerned over the years, and different scientists have taken up this topic, and Karl Voigt of Germany certainly threw his hat in the ring to give an answer. He went around and looked at people who were very rich and hardworking. He looked at people who had jobs that had very high physical demands, like miners. He really did a good survey of the population that he thought would be a representative of those that should be healthy. And in the end, he said that you need 118 grams of protein per day. Okay. Epidemiology, not really laboratory science, but at least a good stab at the topic. But people started saying, wait a minute, those rich folks didn't start eating that kind of protein until they got rich. And those miners and so forth, well, they're just making those choices. And so along come Russell Henry Chittenden, and he said, I'm thinking that's a little bit too high. It's hard to achieve, and we can't prove that's really making a difference. I suggest we cut it in half with 60 grams per day. And so that became a standard. People were happier with something easier to achieve. And so it flew for a while until along came World War I. In World War I, Denmark was basically isolated. Her neighbors were sort of hostile. She had embargoes. I mean, the waters were full of, U-boats and whatever, and so she couldn't import any foods. She had to live on what she could grow. No more importing butter, cheese, beef, pork, coffee, and basically they ate a lot of potatoes and vegetables. physiologist Hindedy looked into this. He says, wow. And he studied them. And lo and behold, he discovered that the death rate in Denmark had fallen to the lowest it had ever fallen in any civilized country in the recorded history. He was fascinated. They're on this low-protein diet, potatoes and vegetables. And they're healthier. The 1918 pandemic didn't touch Denmark. Important point. And so he put himself on a lower protein diet, 40 grams a day, did very well, and as you can see in the reference at the bottom of the screen, in 1920 he published on this. Very famous article, very landmark article. Low protein, good diet, and people are healthier. So those are the epidemiologists, and that's what they came up with. And but really, how would you know how much protein for sure? Well, along came the laboratory scientist that solved the issue. The man that described the last of the 8 essential amino acids, figured out how much you needed of each one by determining your nitrogen balance in a bunch of young men. He did a lot of studies on this. How many grams of protein do you think Dr. Rose recommended at the end of his studies that a grown adult human being needs per day? It might surprise you. His recommendation, nearly double what would send you into a negative nitrogen balance, was 12.7 grams of protein per day. I mean, that's 1 serving of beans. That's all. Really? Does it work? Has anybody done that? Well, there's some African countries that have done that. The Bantus, Bantu women, their diet consists of only 10% protein. They only get 350 milligrams of calcium. They have 5 to 15 children, no calcium deficiency, strong bones, and strong teeth, no hip fractures. Largely a plant-based diet. Interesting. On the other hand, we have the Eskimos out there on the tundra getting largely a diet of fish, which is all protein, have high levels of physical activity. They get lots of calcium from some of the fish bones and so forth, but they have the worst osteoporosis in the world due to the high protein, which can actually reach as much as 400 grams per day. Some of those Inuits in northern Canada just eat fish, and that's about it. Well, let's get back to Dr. Rose. Let's look at the 8 essential amino acids. Let's see where we need to get them, because, we should be balanced in our choices. And so if we look at a graph there of the 8 essential amino acids on the bottom row there, and you see the different bar graphs, they're all pretty low. And these are the 8 essential amino acids, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. And that's how much you need of each of them. So go get them. Whoa, wait a minute. Where do I go get them? Well, let's look at a bunch of foods. All right, let's compare it to broccoli. Oh, whoa. If I ate nothing but broccoli, I'd get more than enough protein, and especially of all the essential amino acids. That's right. Asparagus, white beans. I'm just going down backwards here. Oats. Look at a sweet potato, even sweet and tomatoes. I mean, it's a myth that if you eat vegetables, you'll be low in protein. It's a ridiculous myth. Why is it a ridiculous myth? Because it ain't so. It was a sales job after World War I to market all the protein that they were capable of producing for the war effort to the civilians. And it worked. How did they market it to the people? They put up on walls these posters in the grade schools. You need 4 food groups, 2 of which came from animal protein, milk and meat. And it was nothing to do with science. And everybody believes it. Just ask somebody. Well, tell them you're going on a vegan diet, and they go, oh, where are you going to get your protein? As this chart goes through their head, and what their grandma told them and their mother told them. Very interesting. Now, what about milk? Well, what's the best milk for a human being? How about breast milk? Yeah. Is cow's milk good for the human being? Well, if we look at the amount of protein in 1 cup of human breast milk, it's about 2.6 milligrams. If we look at cow's milk, it's got 8. Why? Because we only have the cow drink the milk for maybe 3-4 months, and it wants to be all brawn and no, you got it, brain. There's stuff in that breast milk that helps grow a brain. And you don't need that much protein. We weren't made to be cows, so why would we drink cow's milk? Yeah, this is an interesting topic. That's not the topic we're talking here, but we'll talk more about it. But we're talking protein here and how much protein is in these products. And if we look at animal protein and its impact on hip fractures, on this chart I have hip fractures up the x-axis. Across the bottom we have how much protein is used by different countries. Notice that South Africa, just like the Bantus, is way down here, only at about 10 milligrams per day of animal protein. So, if they're eating broccoli and tomatoes and so forth, they're getting protein from other sources. But this is the contribution of the animal protein, okay? So we have animal protein here that is very low and a very low hip fracture rate. Notice the United States, probably Canada too. We're way up here at 75 milligrams of animal protein per day and a high hip fracture rate. Well, we can draw a line up here, but all the countries sort of line up that way. Notice the dairy countries, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, they're floating way up there with high hip fracture rates. They probably have a trouble with getting good sunlight too. And notice Hong Kong and New Guinea way down at the bottom. I mean, you just sort of pick where you want to be on that graph and eat that that amount of animal protein or less. And there's no nutritional requirement for animal protein, by the way. You don't have to have it. How do you know you don't have to have it? I met a couple of interesting people. I worked with them for a while. They had been raised vegan, totally plant-based diet. Vegan, might be a misleading word, but totally plant-based diet. No meat, no eggs, no milk. A girl and a boy. When they went off to college, 2 different colleges, interesting things happened. The girl went to college where the college was very much into health, and they, as part of the students' enrollment and as in interest of their health research, they did a underwater weighing of everybody and checked their different body compositions, including their bone mass. At the end of the program, this girl, who had been a total vegetarian her whole life, had the strongest, heaviest bones in the class. Her brother went off to another college, and he's 6'6", weighs 250 pounds, and when he was in his class of nutrition, a little thin lady was lecturing, and she says, well, I don't think any human being can grow to full maturity and be healthy without the use of some animal products, especially animal protein. Well, our friend slowly stood up to his full 6'6" height. He raised his hand high in the air. She looks up like she just saw Bigfoot. And she says, yeah, can I help you? He says, ma'am, I've never eaten animal products or animal protein. She says, oh, I might have to revise my position on that point. And so it's interesting. No, you don't need animal protein to become big and strong and have healthy bones. In fact, it's the opposite. It really is the opposite. And here's why. When you eat that animal protein, when you get it from dairy, these products have too much phosphorus. Phosphorus makes phosphoric acid. I mentioned that earlier. Dairy products have so much phosphoric acid that when you drink them, it puts you in a negative calcium balance just because it needs all the calcium in that dairy product plus some to buffer all that acid. Meat products, high in phosphorus, and grain products. So if we eat everything from the bottom side of that chart, we're much better off. Notice that beans and legumes and vegetables and fruits and so forth, and so eggs, they're a very small pie graft. Yeah, this is phosphorus. If we had a sulfur pie graft, they would be the big white one like dairy. And so they would be the acid former through sulfur, creating sulfuric acid. All right. I want to get back to this thing of why the protein makes a difference, just to illustrate. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 pictures. They're all a little different color. How's that work? Here she's a bit brunette. Here she's redhead. Here she's more, well, greenish blonde. Here she's, oh, very odd color. It's all different colors to make up a picture. Amino acids come in like 20 different varieties. You can have one protein that's only, the red picture here. You can have another protein that's only the yellow picture here. They could have totally different amino acids, and that's the case. So with meat, and let's compare meat, broccoli, and tomatoes for a bit, just to illustrate this. And let's just look at a nutritionist chart. Let's take 200 calories of each of these. Broccoli at the top, tomatoes in the middle, 200 calories of beef, or hamburger in this case, at the bottom. Okay, and so with that 200 calories, they're saying we're getting 10% of the daily value, 200 calories each. And so let's just compare how much protein you get. Broccoli has more protein. Tomatoes just a little bit less. And hamburger is in the middle. So it's a lie that you need meat to get your protein. What about calcium? The hamburger has almost none. The tomatoes have some, broccoli has the most. I mean, the people don't understand this, and so they need to realize meat is not the only source. Meat is very deficient in most things. If you're eating meat as a major portion of your diet, you need to be very careful because you're going to end up malnourished in some important nutrient. Now, how about milk? Let's get back to milk. I say don't cry over spilt milk. In a 12-year study, consumption of milk, 1 glass per day, had a lower hip fracture rate. If you drank 1 glass per week, the green is 1 glass per week, the white is 1 glass per day. 1 glass per day increased hip fracture rate by 45% because you're creating osteoporosis. Dairy product consumption, particularly during your 20s, more than doubles your risk of hip fracture later in life. You cause osteoporosis that lasts a lifetime. When I became plant-based totally, quit drinking milk, my grandmother, who had run a dairy, was sure I was going to have poor bones and teeth. Well, the delusion runs deep. Okay, where can I get my protein though? You're suggesting I get it from vegetable sources. Beans, high in protein. Whole wheat bread, soy milk, potatoes, brown rice. These are good sources. And soy doesn't just have run-of-the-mill protein, it has super protein, things like ginseng. And this certain protein will actually increase bone mineral density. One study in 2 years, they were able to increase bone mass by 6%. That's really good. That's amazingly good. That's better than some of the, nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals. And so soy is very helpful. How about vitamin D? Well, you certainly don't want to be deficient in it. And studies show that people who have osteoporosis, if they'll take a little bit, just a little bit, in this case they're giving them 800 international units per day, that it made a difference. And this was northern Maine. They used 84-year-olds, and when they gave them vitamin D, they reduced their hip fracture risk by 43%. Well, that's significant. The best thing would be to get your vitamin D from the sunlight, although northern Maine can be a bit dreary and maybe not have a lot of sunlight. And so here's the supplements that people are suggesting. How about a herbal tea? Is there any herbal tea that would help? Yes, there is. Horsetail tea is very helpful. It's high in silica, and it increases bone formation. It helps the cortical bone to get thicker and the trabecular bone to have more calcium. It decreases bone resorption. Another food that has lots of this silica would be green beans. And so eat lots of green beans. Your bones need watering. I keep illustrating this. It's important for you to understand that you're supposed to be over 70% water. If you're not drinking your water, your bones get dehydrated. You get dehydrated. When your bones get dehydrated and you get dehydrated, then you have bone loss that might even be increased by 5-fold. So drinking lots of water is part of the cure. And exercise. Remember we said if you don't use it, you lose it. And that if you exercise and you stress the bones, there's an electric effect that helps attract the calcium. So looking at bone loss, we're talking postmenopausal women. Remember, on average, they usually lose 3% per year from our previous slide. And so non-exercisers lost about 3% per year over 26 months. But the exercisers actually totally cut their losses and started improving in bone mineral density by about 0.4% per year. Looking at the hip fracture rate, comparing sedentary people to very active people reduced their hip fracture rate by 55%. Well, here's a promise for you. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your soul in drought and strengthen your bones. You'll be like a watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters do not fail. Isaiah 58:11. Well, so as you change your diet, as you eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, foods high in calcium, you can claim this promise, and the maker of all that food will do his part. In summary, you want to bank on your bones. That's where your calcium is. That's where you need to make deposits. And in banking on your bones, you want to make sure that you do weight-bearing exercises. This will stimulate the bones. You want to reduce animal protein intake. And if you're used to being a grainitarian, you want to include more fresh fruits and vegetables. You want to choose to abandon the calcium thieves, which include, the acid formers, cheese and sodas and meat and all the different things we mentioned, like sugar and salt and so forth. And you want to spend at least 20 minutes a day out in the sun with 25% of your body exposed to the sun. That was calculated to give you enough vitamin D. And if you do that, you'll get about 10,000 units in a week. Eat a plant-based diet rich in naturally occurring calcium. Yes, so what should I eat? Well, really, an unrefined plant-based diet is what we're talking about here. Well, whose diet's that? Isn't that the Creator's diet, the original diet, the Bible diet, the Genesis diet? It is. Fruits, grains, nuts, seeds, vegetables from Genesis 1:29 and 3:18. And does it work? Yes. Looking at how many servings of fruits and vegetables you get per day, if you increase the number of servings from 4 servings a day to 10 servings per day, you reduce the amount of calcium being lost in the urine from your bones by 30%. Just like Kim, who switched from burger and fries and sodas to a plant-based diet and reversed serious osteoporosis that threatened her in her 20s. You know, some of the biggest animals that ever walked the earth were vegetarians. Those dinosaurs ate largely vegetable matter, and some of their bones are still hanging around today. I found a very interesting poem in one of my friends' a health food restaurant, a lesson from nature. The horse is big and fat and round, but eats grains that do abound. The camel who bears his burden long on natural food is made strong. The ox is wide and thick and stout and lives on grasses grown about. The elephant so great and strong, with hay and grain his days prolong. A dinosaur, his years amaze, yet vegetation stretched his days. The baboon's strength is not from meat, for fruits and vegetables he eats, even though he has big eye teeth. If fruits and grains and grass and hay give animals such strength each day, then give me too this simple fare that Mother Nature doth prepare. If we would have endurance at last to finish each small important task, then we should follow God's simple plan and eat the good fruits of the land. I asked him, can I take a picture of that and use it in my presentation? Yeah, so if you want a handout for this lecture with all the details and the research and so forth, go to our website. It's at Northern Lights Health Education. Over there on the left-hand side, you see presentation handouts about halfway down. Click on that and you'll see osteoporosis, nothing to crack up about. This has been another presentation from the series Blueprint for Health and Healing, Reversing Disease from its Foundation.